4. Diagnosed with cancer. By 1997, John was one of the most prominent figures within the industry. His work was renowned and appreciated by many co-actors and fans alike. The franchises that he was part of as an actor set him apart in a league of his own. The best part was that he built this fan base through his own hard work and performance. However, a deadly disease cut his life short and claimed it while he was only 42 years old. But when was he diagnosed with this life-threatening disease, and what unfolded afterwards? How did it impact the filming of probably his last film, and were there talks to remove him and cast someone else just because of his illness? What about the people who stuck with him through thick and thin? How did they react to the news that John might be taken away from them forever? Let us get into these aspects in detail and understand what unraveled after John Cazale was diagnosed with lung cancer. John, who had a reputation for being a heavy smoker, was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer in 1977, while he was filming for one of the best war movies of the time named The Deer Hunter. The cast included Platinum League actors in the film such as Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, Al Pacino, and even his girlfriend Meryl Streep, who was the main female lead of the film. While there has been no confirmation regarding the timeline as to when he initially started to notice the symptoms, some of the things were evident by the time the diagnosis was confirmed. The cancer was mostly attributed to his smoking addiction, something that was common among Hollywood stars at the time. It is believed that it was due to excessive smoking over a prolonged period of time, which resulted in lung cancer. By the time it was diagnosed, the cancer had already attained an advanced stage, where remedies such as chemotherapy and radiation would have been of no use. While it may have made things a bit easier for him before he eventually passed away, there was no dedicated treatment to cure it completely. There is so much to talk about John, but this is probably one of the most crucial aspects of his life, as it shaped it in such a dramatic way that no one could think of. When the news came to him during the filming of The Deer Hunter, directed by Michael Cimino, and what would be his last film, it was shocking. Somewhere in John's mind, he was clear that his life would be cut short, and this would probably be the last project that he would get to work on. However, his dedication paved the way for him, and he completed his part to the best of his abilities. He was playing an important role in the film where he was named Stan, and was acting as a co-worker and hunting buddy to the film's main friend group Mike De Niro, Nick Walken, and Stephen John Savage. John and Meryl tried their best to keep the diagnosis under wraps, but it was no use. John's deteriorating health and multiple visits to chemo and radiation therapy gave their secret away, and in no time the whole cast and crew, including the director, were aware of what John was going through. While this may have sounded like trouble in paradise, it was quite the opposite of what was expected. Fortunately, John was surrounded by people who loved him and were there for him in this tough time. De Niro and Meryl proved to be the biggest help to John at the time. De Niro was emotionally available for John in case he needed to speak to someone. But more importantly, he fought to a great extent for him so that he could be cast in the project they were working on. The thing was that the studio was acting dicey on ensuring an actor diagnosed with a terminal disease. Fortunately, De Niro and the film's director Michael defended John together and took a stand from his side when he couldn't take his own. De Niro said, "He was sicker than we thought, but I wanted him to be in the film." Michael recalls instances where he said, "I was told that unless I got rid of John, they would shut down the picture. It was awful. I spent hours on the phone yelling and screaming and fighting." Additionally, De Niro suggested that John's scene should be shot first so that he can get the required rest for his body. Adhering to the advice, the production proceeded with this approach and John's shots were taken first. It was for the best, as the crew could see in front of their eyes how his health was declining rapidly with each passing day. Being tired, exhausted, and running out of breath were the primary troubles for him at the time. De Niro even went ahead and covered the insurance costs for John, so that the production would not cause any trouble later. Meryl, on the other hand, had a more hands-on approach in taking care of John. The couple was in love with each other, so it came naturally to Meryl. She tagged along with John during all his hospital and chemotherapy visits. De Niro said, "I've hardly ever seen a person so devoted to someone who is falling away like John was. To see her in that act of love for this man was overwhelming. Having a loved one by his side helped him a lot and made things comfortable, even if they were only for a while." Despite her being occupied in the shooting of the same movie, The Deer Hunter, and working simultaneously on other projects, she made time for John because she said, but it wasn't John alone who was suffering here. Being surrounded by the people he loved came at its own cost, not for John but for them. Let's discuss how. 5. An emotional battle. As his health declined more and more, Meryl could see the toll that the disease was taking on him. Meryl found it extremely difficult when she could see the love of her life dying in front of her eyes while knowing the fact that there was nothing she could do to cure him or make the situation better. Her devotion to John was something which was appreciated by many on the set of filming. The amount of effort and time she put into balancing her own work and taking care of John at the time was definitely visible. But at the same time, it took an emotional toll on her mental health and feelings as well. How did Meryl and John meet in the first place? And what happened between them that there was such a deep connection between the two? Let us dial back to 1976, New York. Meryl and John crossed paths during the shooting of the play Shakespeare's Measure for Measure. While Meryl could still be considered a newbie back then, she was ecstatic to audition opposite John Cazale. While the meeting on set was supposed to be just a regular meeting between co-stars or people from the same field, it turned out to be something more profound than anyone could think of. Meryl said, "He wasn't like anybody I'd ever met. It was the specificity of him, and his sort of humanity and his curiosity about people, his compassion. It took a little amount of time for their on-screen chemistry to come alive off-screen as well. For them, it was like the world revolved around them. Now, is it cringe or cute? That is subjective, but we would definitely like to know your opinion on it in the comments below." One of John's close friends, Pacino, said, "They were so happy. I felt they could do anything." The 14-year age gap was never a factor that came between them. Their love story is often regarded as a sweet and quirky one, filled with moments of passion that they were not ashamed of. Fast forward to 1977 when she got the news about John's diagnosis. He was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, which means that the cancer was no longer restricted to his lungs, but had started to affect the bones. Her response to this was rather surprising. She looked up to John and said, "So where should we go for dinner?" Meryl recalls an instance when she was thousands of miles away from John, in Austria shooting for her series Holocaust, through which her main intention was to support her boyfriend financially. Even when she was there, her mind was stuck on John. She said, "I was going crazy. John was sick, and I wanted to be with him." When she came back after 2 months and saw John, she failed to recognize him for a while, which was majorly due to the amount of regression his health went through. However, this did not stop her from taking care of him like a mother. Of course, everything she did out of love for John. She even said, "Me Beau is terribly ill and sometimes, as now, in the hospital. He has very wonderful care and I try not to stand around wringing my hands, but I am worried all the time and pretending to be cheery all the time, which is more exhausting mentally, physically, emotionally than any work I've ever done." These experiences, combined with her own words, sum up the emotional battle that she fought silently, without letting any of it out in front of John. 6. After John died. With his health eroding by the day, it was finally time to shift him into a hospital, where he could be under constant monitoring, and receive the care he needed, to at least pass away in peace. He was admitted to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. After a long and gruesome battle with terminal lung cancer, John took his final breath on March 12, 1978. The person who was affected the most by her loss was her former lover, Meryl, who seemed to be inconsolable when he died. She lost more than a lover that day. She lost her partner and the person with whom she clicked immediately. More than that, she was instantly reminded of the time they had spent together and how he shaped his career in so many ways. Michael Schulman, a biographer, recalls that when John's death was pronounced by the doctors, Meryl wasn't ready to hear it, much less believe it. She pounded on his chest, sobbing, and for a brief, alarming moment, John opened his eyes. "It's all right, Meryl," he said weakly. "It's all right." Then he closed his eyes and died. Her first call was to John's brother, Stephen. She sobbed throughout. Some time passed and Meryl said, "I learned what really is important. I found what is true and what's not worth pursuing." As heartbreaking as it was for Meryl, the only healthy and sane option she was left with was moving on. Yes, it would take time, but she had to start somewhere. It was then that she decided to move out of their Manhattan apartment in New York. It was almost a year when John passed away. She said in an interview, "The death is still very much with me. It has forced me to confront my own mortality, and once you do that, you look at things differently." In an attempt to move on from what was one of the most tragic losses of her life, she went ahead and married a sculptor named Donald Don Gummer, who was introduced to her by John's brother Stephen. After she moved out of their Manhattan apartment, she did not have a place to stay in. It was then that Don invited her to stay in his apartment while he traveled Europe. 6 months later, when Don returned, he asked her to stay, and she agreed. After being friends for over 6 months, they decided to marry each other. The decision came pretty naturally to both of them, and it was evident that they were in love. As of now, they have been together for almost 40 years, and it was Don who helped her put herself back together piece by piece. She said, "I haven't got over John's death, but I've got to go on living, and Don has shown me how to do that." While this was the reality from Meryl's aspect, there were others as well who were affected deeply by the loss of John Cazale. Al Pacino and John had developed a close friendship while they were filming together for the GodFather series and Dog Day Afternoon. Something apparent was their friendship and bond as actors that went beyond the screen. Pacino had massive respect for John as an actor and considered him to be one of the greatest talents in the field of acting at their time. This is what John said in an interview after John's death, "I learned so much from him. I had done a lot of theater and 3 films with him. He was inspiring, he just was. And he didn't get credit for any of it. He was in 5 films, all Oscar-nominated films. And he was great in all of them. He was particularly great in GodFather II. And I don't think he got any kind of recognition. Another abrupt turn came and Pacino explained the reason behind not attending the Academy Awards where he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for The Godfather. He said, "No, absolutely not. I was at that stage in my life where I was somewhat, more or less, rebellious. I did go back for others. But I didn't go to them early on. It was the tradition. I don't think Bob De Niro went to one of them. George C. Scott didn't even go. They had to wake him up. Marlon didn't go. Look, Marlon gave back the Oscar. How about that? They were rebelling from the Hollywood thing. That kind of thing was in the air. There was no denial to the fact that Pacino mourned the loss of his close friend. However, he has never been shy to say good things about him. He recalls instances where he elevated a regular scene so much through his acting that everyone wanted to be around him. He crafted a name for himself in the acting industry which is achievable by a selected few who are competent in their craft and have an unparalleled dedication to making things happen. John was such a character, whose loss affected the acting industry as well, as it lost one of its rarest gems. Robert De Niro was another one of his close associates who was traumatized by the death of John. Apart from sharing the screen together in projects such as The Godfather 2 and The Deer Hunter, they had a strong chemistry as extremely close friends. He admired John as a supremely talented actor who was dedicated to his craft and had a gentle personality at the same time. His acting game was stronger than most of his time as he only did 5 films, but all of them got nominated for Oscars. As discussed earlier in the video, you witnessed it yourself, the time when De Niro went ahead and proved their relationship by going out of the way for him to make sure that he was included in the cast of The Deer Hunter, which was their last project together. Apart from standing up for him, De Niro was not shy of helping John financially with his treatment. During the time Meryl was in Austria shooting for the series Holocaust, De Niro and Al Pacino took turns making sure that John did not go for his radiation treatments alone. These instances go on to prove the power of friendship and love, and the impact that it can have on a dying person's life. It was without a doubt that John was going through so much when he battled with a terminal disease that was shutting him down. The amount of physical and emotional strain he went through would be something that he could only explain with accuracy. However, to have people around you who stick up for you is no less than a blessing in disguise. While his death was a tragedy, there was no shortage of attempts to make his final days as comfortable as possible. What do you think about the incident that happened with John? Do you recall an incident where your closest friends supported you no matter how dire the situation was? Which part of this video did you find the most fascinating? Comment below and share your experiences with us. If you enjoyed what you just saw, click that subscribe button, as we have so much more Hollywood content on our channel just for you. Drop a like on this video and share it with your friends and family and those who are hardcore fans of John Cazale.